A man that is not that aggressive alpha, to me, is a more attractive man.
I don't think most of us view alpha the way that men think we do. It's almost like a feeling of insecurity if they're not in a position of power.
Masculine man wants to take away the decision-making, choices, opinions. It's like they want to control the woman almost completely.
Something's missing, like you're threatened by something. Hi, Tanya. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Erin. Happy Saturday.
Yes, happy Saturday. All right, well, let's just dive right in. You've got stuff to do.
I'm headed to the Sin City to explore more topics.
Well, we definitely don't want to hold you back from that. You gotta come back and tell us what that trip was like. Okay, so keeping with the structure of our podcast, and we promise it'll get better and better. It's just practice makes perfect. So we're calling this the Unscripted Equation. And so for today's equation, like the title of it, because this is actually in a cluster, that means we're going to have several topics under this umbrella. And this one is going to be related to the myth of the beta male, because that's a topic that has come up in a lot of mainstream media conversations. And so for today, it's the pheromonal playground, deconstructing alpha versus beta. And so this is coming from the flawed zoological research, on alpha versus beta. Okay. So it's been integrated into self-help. It's been integrated into the dating scene. And so we're going to use that frame of reference and how it's caused some damage, like from a sociological perspective and psychological perspective, using those labels, the alpha and beta. It's not real helpful. So yeah, we're gonna, I guess the question is it toxic or is it needed for what we call success out in the real world?
Yep. All about men. The manosphere is a hot topic right now.
Absolutely. So yeah, and it won't necessarily be like from a political. I think lots of things are politicized, and we're having to grapple with that. Like people's values and all of that. We used to look at it from like a psychological perspective and personal growth perspective, but values and politics, that has now become a thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's not our intention like to bring up all of that. It's just that it's in our face, like what we're talking about, like how it impacts relationships and self-worth and all of that. Like, I don't think there's really much separation. So,
I agree. Yeah. Not been that way for a while. Now we just are kind of having to, it's part of it, but we'll try not to get so involved in that part.
Yeah. Okay. So from your perspective, do you think the pursuit of alpha, is that toxic masculinity, or is it needed for success? What do you think?
I mean, if it were my own little bubble and it was just me in the world, I would say it's toxic. However, I and the whole world with our billions of people, I would say that I can see where it's also helpful to be successful. If you look at most of the top positions, across different industries, most are a kind of alpha male. They're taken up by an alpha male. And just from a drive perspective, it would make sense, right? An alpha male is not going to, stop and give their position to somebody else. They're going to keep going. I mean, that's what they do. However, I think it can cross the line into toxicity because, there's always, what are you burning on your way up there? Mm-hmm. And so both. I hate that I'm the gray area usually. I don't, this is my not black and white thinking. which I think it can be healthy, but people want to know, what's your position? What's your position, right? I think it depends on the situation and what's occurring and what is the aftermath and, what are the effects of being alpha? Do you take over and really harm someone? Like what type of harm are you causing? And is it emotional harm? Is it financial harm? It's just speaking of success. So relationship harm, do you not give your partner a choice in much and not willing to compromise? So
yeah. And how do you define success? It's like, what is the context, like what you're talking about? Like it is hard to not be in a gray area here because there has to be context. Like, is this work setting? Is this your romantic relationship? And so what is success? And then what if like one of a former client talked about how he felt anxious in the social setting because of his low value, or what he perceived was low value from women, because he preferred emotional connection and collaboration over being aggressive and competitive. And he likes doing that, like whether he's in the workforce, he likes a more collaborative approach. And he also likes that in his relationships. But he felt like women would perceive him as beta or in a negative light because that's just his personality. And it's been effective. I guess the types of work that he has done, like there is more team building and collaborative, and he's like in a mid-management. I guess he still is. But that makes sense to me. Like if you're not the CEO, you still have to be working with the lower
a team player
staff. Absolutely. And so this made sense to me. But it was interesting that he thought this is what women wanted. They wanted the CEO type versus the collaborative type. So what do you think about that?
Anecdotal personal experience can really shape our beliefs, our belief system. And, he probably had some experience that taught him that belief. And so whether it was a sister or former lover, who knows? But I would be curious as to where that belief started and came from. If he, maybe media, right? It's in our media. It's part of some, certain cultures. This
true.
And so, bless his little heart. I love that he wanted to be this man that's a team player, because I would say most women, maybe I'll speak for myself. I would say as a female, a man that is not that aggressive alpha, to me, is a more attractive man. But
I agree with that. I would agree with that, because you can still have
protective qualities.
Attractive qualities, or be a go-getter, or be what we visualize as masculine, but still, but not be an asshole.
Yeah. Shut up, woman, get in the kitchen and make me dinner.
Yeah, it could
That
be
kinda.
dude, you shut up and you go make me dinner.
That's what I always hear in my head when this very alpha masculine man is like, get in the kitchen, make me a sandwich.
Yeah, that is our visual of that. Like, what is an alpha? And really, I don't think most of us view alpha the way that men think we do.
What do you think what do you think they believe we think?
Listen to some of the stuff they say, where they're still in a position of power, and it's almost like a feeling of insecurity if they're not in a position of power versus, or like competing in some way. And women, that's not the way that we're usually viewing things. Yeah. We feel threatened when guys do that. It's like, oh, okay, well, you don't think that I'm enough, and so you're pushing me down as if I'm less significant than you are, versus we see eye to eye. We may have a few differences in opinions, just like people do,
Yeah.
but just because of my gender, it does not mean that you look down on me.
Yeah. It makes me think of maybe when men are always like, women don't know what they want to eat. It's like, what do you want to eat? Almost like men have to make all the decisions because women are too emotional to make a choice. I feel like maybe in their mind, it's like, well, I have to make the decisions of, a lot of things. I mean, even sometimes down to what women wear. I know I've seen that. It's like men will buy outfits because they like that on them. And some women are, and walking down a Cherry Street look, and it's because that's what their man wants to see. And they may not be as comfortable, or it could be the complete opposite, right? They want them to dress homely so no one looks at them. It takes away I feel like men want to, that alpha, very extreme, masculine man wants to take away the decision making, the choices, opinions that women may have about how they want to look, how they want to act. It's like they want to control the woman almost completely, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And I can't get past the thought that when you have those extreme values, like does it mean that something's missing? Like you're threatened by something, fearful of something, if you don't have all of that control. And so that just doesn't sound safe or
Appealing.
healthy. No, not at all. No.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a very extreme alpha male.
Yeah.
I would say that I have never outwardly seen somebody express that a man express that in a public setting. Like, for example, I went to meet my friend from college, and we met at this Mexican restaurant. It was her mom and dad and her aunt and uncle. And I was meeting her aunt and uncle for the first time. And it was so interesting what they were like, oh, we're so glad you came because you really lightened the mood. And I was like, really? I was like, not under where this was coming from, but they're like telling me about the aunt and uncle were very nice and hospitable towards me. And I'm thinking, well, it's usually the way people are on the first time meeting someone. And I asked about, I'm always asking about relationships. And I asked, why would they say that? What's the deal with the couple? They've been together for 45 years, have a couple children together. They interacted. I told them about the podcast. And it's always an interesting expression people get on their face when I say, I'm working with the sexologist, and we talk about all of these relationship structures and how to have healthy intimacy. And it's interesting the look people get on their face, like it's either like, huh, or and so they said the first thing they said about the aunt and uncle was that they picked specifically the husband was Jehovah Witness. The sister, or the aunt of my friend, she was raised Catholic but converted to being a Jehovah Witness. And I said, interesting. I said, okay. And they go, and literally right after they said, well, when he found out how much control he had in a Jehovah Witness religion, he made her convert. And I was like,
Wow.
Yeah, he was like very charming and engaging and making jokes. So that's what I mean by they're not always right. They're not going to publicly announce, woman, get in there and make me a sandwich. It's usually this covert, people only hear about it from other family members because something got slipped out, or they might have seen maybe he couldn't hold it together at some family event. and they saw this controlling nature. So I find that that's usually how it comes about, is maybe other people notice the types of behaviors, and the person actually doing it trying their best to kind of conceal that.
Mhm.
You know, which makes you think, right? Do they themselves understand it's not acceptable behavior?
Well, I mean, it goes back to like when I was telling you about the client who felt anxiety and perceived as low value because of being data. And you said, well, I wonder where that comes from, that viewpoint comes from. And this is an example of where religion can play a role in that, of where your value system about relationship power dynamics and gender roles and all of that. And this is an example of that. And it's also an example of religion being used as a weapon, just like therapy can be used as a weapon. And this is an example of that, like legitimizing bad behaviors by labeling it under the religious umbrella, for lack of better phrases.
Tell people what, because I think you said something that people are going to say, what does she mean therapy can be they're going to want to know
as a weapon.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I've had couples do that, where one person will, let's say that infidelity happens in a relationship. And so when they come to therapy, the person who was wounded, understandably, like they're having all these emotions all over the place, and it's understandable. However, they will want the partner who was unfaithful to be punished in some way. And so therapy will be used, well, you have to go to therapy. If you're not in therapy, that means you're not working on things. And that's not true. And so it's used as a weapon or punishment, versus this is being used to help us to restructure the relationship,
Yeah.
And so I have to say that often, using things as punishment. And this is another example, I think, the religion. And I hope, people don't think I'm blaspheming or anything like that. The religion you're speaking of, I used to be part of that religion. So I'm very familiar with the Bible and different religions. So that can be a whole nother conversation, a debate.
Yeah. And I guess I never really fully delved into the practices of that religion. And not to say that I'm sure there are people that practice that in a more healthy way.
Just like all religions.
Right.
Just like there are stereotypes of certain religions, and then there's the reality. Like people think voodoo is this terrible religion where people are worshiping the devil and all. That's not even the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not what people think it is. Or Wiccan, being Wiccan. People think that it's, people flying around on broomsticks and putting spells on people and stuff. And none of it's like that.
I wish I could fly in a broomstick to Vegas like that.
That would be cool.
Can you imagine coming into Vegas on a broomstick?
I would just use, beam me up, Scotty. Right? That's how I would
teleport.
Yeah, but this is good, and I think it'll probably have to be more than 3 episodes, because this gets into, like, we didn't expect for religion, like, to come up, like, wow, that's a huge part of people's value systems that can impact everything, from childhood. If you grow up Catholic and then you end up converting and all of that, that's a huge part of your value system that can impact how you think about gender roles and power dynamics in relationships.
And what was fun, as I watched them leave the parking lot when we left the restaurant, and they get in this little sporty Miata. So
it's good that people are interested. Like when you say, mental health and sexuality, and people are intrigued.
Yeah. It's like they want to ask questions, but then they're being shy about it. But I bet if it was me with just them, they would. But because it was me, their sister, their brother-in-law, and their niece, they're like, I got to keep the image of Uncle and intact, which
Yeah.
that's always a fun topic too, is the roles that we play within our different groups and what we do in private or in the what we don't want other people to see about us.
That's a whole nother topic about being authentic. What's the difference? Like, how do you balance that authenticity? And yeah, that's a whole nother. See, you're coming up with new topics. Okay. So for the this part of the beta male myth, what challenge would you give a guy, if he's feeling anxious about the perception people have of him as being, he is more emotional. He likes the connected part, all of that, I guess for lack of better phrases, the romantic part.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fearful that women will make fun of him. What assignment would you give him?
I would say ask that question to the women available in his, environment, whether that's family, women, co-workers that are women.
Ask what?
Ask them what they think about that type of interaction. What do they value, or would they prefer a man that's, this high achieving kind of alpha, take control, take the lead, or more romantic, compromising, sharing, emotionally available man, and gather the evidence himself, because he's sounded as if he was afraid to even, he didn't say where this came from, but I don't think he did his, homework, his investigation. I think if he talked to women and asked them, I mean, if he's scared to do that, do an anonymous questionnaire at the office, I guess.
That's what I was going to say. You're bringing up a personal assignment he could do, or social assignment. And I think at work, he could ask this from a different perspective, because it's homework.
Mm-hmm.
What are the reasons that the people who are his subordinates like his leadership style? Is it because he's alpha or beta? What makes them really appreciate his leadership style and has been successful? And then that's something that he, how can you carry that over into the social setting if you're very successful at it at work? That
and asking, what level, of success. I mean, if he's trying to be a CEO, is his belief that you can't achieve that by being a beta male or, a likable guy? Does he have to be alpha and kind of aggressive and maybe, mean? I say mean, but, this just man that has no feelings for anybody below him. I mean, is that really the belief that he has, that you cannot achieve it without that? I would say that's still happens today. I mean, there are also women who lead that. I mean, someone would say, well, is that woman also kind of alpha? That's a CEO. Is that really what he's wanting as a type of career? Because that comes with a whole host of other things along with it. Just all of those responsibilities. And I say responsibilities because they just sound like you're at war, but that's my, again, personal opinion, not something I would want.
Well, he's successful at work. And so, some of that, application can be for personal life, depending on who he has in his circle.
Yeah.
Well, this was a good topic. And of course, we're going to continue. Some of the others under this umbrella are going to be related to emotional intelligence. Let's see, what are some of the others? The incel equation, when insecurity becomes ideology. Soft power, hard judgment. That's emotional intelligence versus dominance. We touched on some of these things. Mm-hmm. And so moving forward, those will be part of our conversation.
Yay.
All right. So let's click out of this one.